asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the transient to the eternal. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you. A few years ago, I was invited to a prominent university in Boston. And I was asked to guest teach a graduate seminar, and so I did that, explaining Sri Ramakrishna's teachings on religious pluralism. That went really, really well. In the afternoon, the same professor invited me to attend, just to sit in on the first class of the semester on an introduction to Hinduism for a large group of impressionable undergraduate students, mostly non-Indian and non-Hindu. And she has a PowerPoint up. And this professor, by the way, is Catholic. So the first slide has the Purusha Suktam, the famous Vedic hymn, which explains, it's using a metaphor of a human body and says that the Brahman is the head and the Kshatriyas are, and so on. And the Kshatriyas are the arms, I believe, and so on. And she says the first thing, her opening volley is, Hinduism is based on the caste system. And she then explained that the caste system is a hereditary one. And of course, we all know that the hereditary caste system is responsible for all sorts of oppression and terrible things. And so she doesn't have to say it, but she implies it, right? That Hinduism is a religion that is to be shunned or avoided, better to be Christian, ideally Catholic. But what's more disturbing, well, by the way, I should mention that because I was sitting in on the class, I objected when she said that. And I tried to correct her and pointed out that in the Gita, and we'll talk about this later in the talk, in the Gita, the caste system is not even really a system, it's the caste doctrine. And it's based on guna and karma. We'll talk about it later, but it has nothing to do with heredity. What's more disturbing is a couple months ago, I was invited to participate in an online discussion of Swami Vivekananda's views, and the organization that invited me was a prominent so-called Hindu organization. I'm not going to mention it, but they call themselves a Hindu organization. The head of this organization, in the course of our discussion, trotted out the same argument. She said that the Purusha Suktam, this ancient Vedic hymn, supports the hereditary caste system. This is unusual, and this is really, I would say, very unique to Hinduism. This phenomenon of what I would call self-hating Hindus. It's very interesting. You don't get that in other religions, or for the most part, as far as I could tell. But with Hinduism, you get so many people who call themselves Hindu, and one of their main aims seem to be to malign Hinduism. So the whole purpose of this talk is to correct our misconceptions, any potential misconceptions that people might have, we ourselves, even as Hindus. If somebody were to see you on the street and ask you, what does your religion teach? What is Hinduism? What does it mean to be Hindu? What will be your answer? So my talk is an attempt to explain that, because it's actually not the easiest question to answer. It took me a long time to kind of work this out. As many of you know, I'm a Hindu chaplain at USC and UCLA. And it's striking because there are a number of Hindu students on campus in both these places and they tell me privately, you know, Maharaj, we're embarrassed, we're afraid to call ourselves Hindu when people ask us what religion we follow. Because there's this kind of assumption among a lot of people that Hindu equals right-wing Hindu fanatic. And it's very troubling, and it's pervasive. When people think of Hinduism, often they think about it in terms of the 3 P's and the 3 C's. What are the 3 P's? Poverty, population, and polytheism. What are the 3 C's? Caste, curry, and cows. curry is delicious, and it's kind of the national food of England, but still, that's not the essence of Hinduism. It's a total caricature. And yet this is most people's understanding of what Hinduism is. It's an abomination, and that needs to be corrected. And this anti-Hindu sentiment, it runs deep and it's pervasive. It's not local to any country. I'm an academic philosopher, and so I can speak to a very strong and pervasive academic bias against Hinduism in some of the most prominent universities. If you just look at different universities and their centers for religious studies, you'll find plenty of centers for Jaina studies and many chairs for professors of Jain studies. Buddhist studies, extremely popular. Christianity and Islam, obviously. Almost no chairs for Hindu studies, almost no centers for Hindu studies. There's an Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, which is actually not officially associated with Oxford University, but they're very rare, few and far between. And the entire mainstream Western media, or a lot of it, including New York Times, BBC, they seem to have a strong bias against Hinduism. And they often try to portray it in a negative light and to misrepresent it. The most recent case of this is the terrible Pahalgam massacre in Kashmir, where 25 Hindus were massacred by terrorists. How did the New York Times cover it in the beginning? They didn't refer to it as a terrorist attack. They didn't refer to the 25 who were killed as Hindus. Very troubling. Just they're not even reporting facts anymore because media has become so biased. So listen, I don't want you to think that I'm making a political speech here. I'm completely apolitical. Monks should stay out of politics. That's fundamental to our tradition. I'm neither left-wing nor am I right-wing, but I'm a Hindu and I'm a proud Hindu. And saying that doesn't mean I'm a right-wing Hindu fanatic. This is really important to keep in mind. Closer to home, so we've been talking about different things about misrepresentations of Hinduism, but closer to home, we're all sitting here now, we're Vedantins. I'm giving a talk at the Vedanta side of Southern California. Another interesting phenomenon, I hear many Vedantins say, I'm a Vedantin, but I'm not Hindu. Somehow contrasting Vedanta with Hinduism, with the implication that Hinduism is somehow ethnic, narrow, culturally specific, and that Vedanta is universal, it's more philosophical. This is another fundamental mistake. I gave a whole talk on this in Trabuco Canyon called Is Vedanta Hindu? So you can look at that for more details on that. I'm going to have a different focus today. But the whole rest of this talk is going to be devoted to giving us a more accurate and nuanced understanding of what Hinduism really is, so that it's clear to ourselves and also that we are able to articulate it clearly and compellingly to other people, other Hindus, non-Hindus, whoever. I grew up in a Hindu family, Hindu household in Boston, and I would call myself, or I would say that I was raised as a cultural Hindu. Okay, what does that mean? It means that I grew up in a kind of Bengali community there, and my parents would take me to pujas a few times a year. Saraswati Puja, Durga Puja, those are some of the big ones for Bengalis. Nobody explained to me the spiritual significance of the puja, of the ritualistic worship. As a result, I had very little interest. And so I would play football outside with my friends and go in once, especially Saraswati Puja is interesting because my parents would tell me to take my textbooks to the puja and place them at the feet of Mother Saraswati because she's the goddess of learning. And I was like, this is our religion? It's some kind of superstition that I put these books in front of this idol and then I'm going to get better grades. So that was my understanding of Hinduism. Nobody corrected it. Nobody in that community explained to me what the purpose of all these things were. And as a result, I got disenchanted, played football outside, came in for lunch, delicious lunch, khichdi, and then went back to playing football or whatever, hanging out with friends. And I can guarantee you, many kids these days, Hindu kids growing up, will attest to the fact that this is very common. This is the way that most of them are brought up. What I was missing was anybody to just explain to me what are the core spiritual principles of Hinduism. This is what I think is sorely lacking. We really need it. I should mention, to my mother's credit, that she has had a daily, twice-a-day practice of doing puja and meditation and reading the Gita. So she would do it from when she's been doing it for decades. She still does it every morning and every evening. And I noticed that, but I didn't make much of it, and she also didn't sort of involve me in it. If she had, I probably would have revolted, so it's better that she didn't. But anyway, at the same time, I'm a budding philosopher as a young kid. And so by high school, I became an agnostic because I didn't believe in this idea that you can be born into a religion. That just seemed irrational to me. What does it mean to be born into a religion? Just because I happen to be born in a certain place to a certain family, it means I have to automatically accept their religion? It could be a dumb religion. So that was the way I was thinking. And I was an agnostic. In college, but I was a spiritual seeker at the same time. I had this kind of drive, this curiosity to understand the deeper principles of religion, but I didn't restrict myself to Hinduism. And so I started reading the Bible in college. Started having debates with Christian friends and other people. I read some of the Buddhist scriptures, Dhammapada especially, and I read Bhagavad Gita. And that was the first scripture of Hinduism that really spoke to me. It opened my eyes, and it completely changed my understanding of what Hinduism is. I became just taken with this whole Vedantic philosophy explained in the Gita. And so I had to do this kind of reverse engineering and figure out what Hinduism really means for myself by reading the Gita. Years later, this is much later, I discovered some great pieces explaining the spiritual principles of Hinduism, and I'm going to be drawing on them today. One of them is Swami Vivekananda's paper on Hinduism, which he delivered at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. Another one is his Bengali essay, Hindu Dharma Ki, What is Hindu Dharma? Which is translated into English as something like Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna in the complete works. Not the best translation, unfortunately. And Sri Aurobindo has two pieces. I'll mention one now, and then I'll bring up another one a little bit later in the talk. He has this great, in the course of a chapter of a book, he just suddenly raises a question. He says, so what is Hinduism? And he gives a beautiful answer. It's about a 3 to 4 page answer. It's in a book called A Defense of Indian Culture. And because it's hard to find, I've added a link to the PDF of those 3 or 4 pages explaining what is Hinduism for Sri Aurobindo. It's a wonderful little essay. And if you're interested in like a textbook, if you want a textbook or something, I think the best one, at least from our standpoint, which is this kind of non-sectarian Vedanta, is Satish Chandra Chatterjee's Fundamentals of Hinduism. Satish Chandra Chatterjee's Fundamentals of Hinduism. It's an old book, hard to find a hard copy, but I'm pretty sure you can find the whole PDF online on archive.org because I think it's out of copyright. Okay, so I'm going to be explaining now Hinduism by drawing on these sources and my own understanding. And here's a pro tip for Hindu parents who want to raise their children as Vedantins or Hindus. First of all, the 4 principles I'm going to outline, that's really important. You should be able, when your kids ask you what is Hinduism, instead of just dragging them to puja, explain to them what Hinduism is based on the 4 core principles I'm going to explain, and have them read these little pieces with them. It'll really help. The paper, Swamiji's paper on Hinduism, Sri Aurobindo's writings, they'll be grateful. I should mention quickly that the term Hindu is a relatively recent one. There's an Indus river called Sindhu, and so the Persians referred to the people living beyond the Indus river, the Sindh river. They called them Hindus. So Sindhu became Hindu. That's the historical root of the term. And when I gave my talk on Is Vedanta Hindu in Trabuco, I always read the comments, and so one of them was, or many of them, they're like, why are you saying Hindu? Sanatana Dharma is the better term. Sanatana Dharma means eternal dharma, eternal religion. Whatever name you want, you can use. I mean, I'm not dictating, but I think it's important to recognize that some of the greatest Hindu thinkers and yogis and saints and mystics and avatars were perfectly happy using the term Hindu. Sri Ramakrishna himself used the term Hindu. Swami Vivekananda Sri Aurobindo, and many others use the term Hindu, it's useful to have an umbrella term to encompass all the different spiritual traditions on the Indian subcontinent. And Swami Vivekananda said the following about this term. He says, "We are Hindus. I do not use the word Hindu in any bad sense at all, nor do I agree with those that think there is any bad meaning in it. In old times, it simply meant people who lived on the other side of the Indus. Today, a good many among those who hate us may have put a bad interpretation upon it. But names are nothing. It's true that some people, when they hear the word Hindu, they're triggered and they think that it's a swear word and you're a fanatic. Then it's our responsibility as Hindus to correct them. We shouldn't shy away from the word just because some people misunderstand it." So the main argument of my talk is the following. I want to suggest that there are two Hinduisms, which I would call cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism. And I want to emphasize at the beginning that this is not a distinction that's unique to Hinduism. We can also distinguish cultural Christianity from spiritual Christianity. We can distinguish cultural Islam from spiritual Islam, cultural Buddhism from spiritual Buddhism, and so on. But what does this distinction look like in the context of Hinduism? That's what I'm going to focus on today. Cultural Hinduism is the way I was brought up. Hinduism is a kind of ethnic, so because I have brown skin and I'm Indian, ethnically Indian, I'm automatically Hindu in this cultural sense. And I go to these pujas and put textbooks at this idol, ring bells and wave lamps, that kind of stuff. And I don't want you to think I'm being pejorative about it. I'll come back to this, but I love puja now, but that's because I understand the spiritual basis of all that. Swami Vivekananda was scathing about cultural Hinduism. And there are these great little one-liners and expressions that are impressed on my mind when I first read them. He said, in India, imagine the context, 19th century India, he said, religion has moved into the kitchen. And he hated what he called don't-touchism. Don't touch this, don't do that, no, don't eat this, don't eat that. Is that really what Hinduism is about? And a lot of so-called Hindus, they just become obsessed with these things. Excessive ritualism, mechanical worship, don't-touchism, food as a be-all and end-all. By contrast, what is spiritual Hinduism? This is the true ancient Hinduism. This goes back to the great Vedas, the Vedantic scriptures, Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. It's the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. Spiritual Hinduism teaches us the spiritual principles and spiritual practices that will liberate us from all suffering and give us endless fulfillment through the attainment of our true nature, the divine reality. Now, this is a discovery I recently made. I came up with the title of the talk a while ago, but just a few days ago I discovered this amazing letter by Sri Aurobindo, written to his brother Biden in 1910. And just very casually in the course of this letter, he says the following: there are two Hinduisms. One which takes its stand on the kitchen and seeks its paradise by cleaning the body. By the way, so Sri Aurobindo was strongly influenced by both Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. He had read all Swamiji's scathing criticisms of cultural Hinduism, so he has all this in mind. Another Hinduism which seeks God, not through the cooking pot and the social convention, but in the soul. The latter is also Hinduism, and it is a good deal older and more enduring than the other. It is the Hinduism of Bhishma and Sri Krishna, of Shankara and Chaitanya, the Hinduism which exceeds Hindustan. Notice what he's saying here. This is a Hinduism which explodes any kind of ethnic boundaries. You don't need brown skin to be Hindu. Was from of old and will be forever, because it grows eternally through the eons. Its watchword is not kriya, but karma. I'm going to explain these Sanskrit terms. Its watchword, spiritual Hinduism's watchword, is not kriya, but karma. Not shastra, but jnanam. Not achar, but bhakti. Yet, and this is also crucial, yet it accepts kriya, shastra, and achar. It here is spiritual Hinduism. Yet it accepts kriya, shastra, and achar not as ends to be followed for their own sake, but as means to perfect karma, jnanam, and bhakti. There's a lot here, and it requires some unpacking. So first of all, what is cultural Hinduism? Sri Aurobindo uses 3 terms, Sanskrit terms, to encompass cultural Hinduism. Kriya. What does he mean by that? Mechanical, lifeless rituals, just going through the motions. Shastra, the scriptures. How can he put the scriptures in this category, like the Upanishads? It all depends on your attitude toward the scriptures. If they become the be-all and the end-all, and you become obsessed with the minute details about rituals and this and that mentioned in the scriptures, and that becomes religion to you, then even the scriptures become a bondage. That also becomes part of cultural Hinduism. And achar, he says, is the third element in cultural Hinduism. Observances like what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat. It's what Swamiji says. Religion has moved into the kitchen. What's pure and impure, what you can touch, not touch, whom you can touch and not touch, whom you can associate with and not associate with. But what does Sri Aurobindo say? In spiritual Hinduism, the true ancient Hinduism, kriya, these rituals, get transformed into karma. It's not that you reject the rituals, the pujas and the waving of lamps. No, we do it every day in arati and these large pujas. But because we understand the deeper spiritual significance of what we're doing. The whole purpose of all of these rituals and attending these pujas is to purify the mind and to cultivate devotion toward God. If we understand that, he says, kriya gets transformed into karma yoga, and it becomes a spiritual practice. The very things that are bondages actually become aids to our spiritual realization and spiritual progress. What about scriptures? Scriptures, he says, become means to the end of attaining jnanam, spiritual knowledge of the infinite divine reality and our true spiritual natures. And then achara. What's the purpose in all these observances about food and all these other things that we observe on a day-to-day basis, that especially you find it in India? They're not ends in themselves. They're means to the attainment of bhakti. They're means to the attainment of devotion. It's a way of purifying the mind and cultivating devotion for God. You'll find that in the Gita, for instance. Toward the end of the Gita, Krishna distinguishes 3 kinds of food based on the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So it's not that food is irrelevant. And what we eat does affect our spiritual sort of attitude and our spiritual life in different ways, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's a secondary matter. That's why Sri Ramakrishna would say, someone can eat pork, but if that person thinks of God, that person is far more sattvic and far more spiritual than the person who eats havishanna, which means the most sattvic of all foods, but has their mind on lust and greed. That doesn't mean you should eat whatever you want. It means it's a secondary consideration. It can be helpful, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Okay, so this is really important to emphasize. I don't want you guys to come away thinking that Medhananda has distinguished cultural Hinduism from spiritual Hinduism and is rejecting cultural Hinduism and is a spiritual... No, nothing like that. As Hindus, once we understand spiritual Hinduism, the core spiritual principles of Hinduism, we can practice those different cultural aspects of Hinduism to our heart's content. Because we know that they're means to the end of spiritual realization and spiritual progress. That's the beauty of it. Perform as many pujas as you want. Sri Ramakrishna proved this in his own life. He realized God through doing puja. And he had the direct realization of Mother Kali through his puja, right? Now, I want to come back to Sri Aurobindo's letter. It's extremely important, this letter. And I put this letter under the YouTube description as well. So I gave you 2 links. One is to his essay, What is Hinduism? And the other is this passage from a letter to his brother in 1910, where he explains the 2 Hinduisms. There are 2 Hinduisms. So after explaining that there are these 2 Hinduisms, which I'm calling cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism, he then says in the next paragraph, the higher and truer Hinduism, so that's what I'm calling spiritual Hinduism, is also of 2 kinds. Sectarian and unsectarian, disruptive and synthetic. That which binds itself up in the aspect, and that which seeks the all with a capital A. The first is born of rajasic or tamasic attachment to an idea, an experience, an opinion or set of opinions, a temperament, an attitude, a particular guru, a chosen avatar. This attachment is intolerant, arrogant, proud of a little knowledge, scornful of knowledge that is not its own. It is always talking of the kusamskaras, superstitions of others, and is blind to its own. Or it says, my guru is the only guru, and all others are either charlatans or inferior. Or, my temperament is the right temperament, and those who do not follow my path are fools or pedants or insincere. Or, my avatar is the real God himself, and all the others are only lesser revelations. Or, my Ishtadevata, that means the form of God I prefer. My Ishtadevata is God. The others are only his partial manifestations. Then Sri Aurobindo says, when the soul rises higher, it follows by preference its own ideas, experiences, opinions, temperament, guru, ishta, but it does not turn an ignorant and exclusive eye upon others. There are many paths, it cries, and all lead equally to God. So now he's coming to this non-sectarian form of spiritual Hinduism. All men, even the sinner and the atheist, are my brothers in sadhana, spiritual practice, and the beloved is drawing them each in his own way to the one without a second. And then Sri Aurobindo says finally, but when the full knowledge dawns, I embrace all experiences in myself. I know all ideas to be true, all opinions useful, all experiences and attitudes means and stages in the acquisition of universal experience and completeness. All gurus, imperfect channels or incarnations of the one and only teacher with a capital T. All ishtas and avatars to be God himself. And then he adds, crucially, that is what Ramakrishna taught by his life and sadhana. And therefore he is the avatar of the age, the divine incarnation of the age, the one who prepares the future of humanity. In the next Sunday talk I'll give here in a few weeks, it's on Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Aurobindo. A lot of people have a misconception that Sri Aurobindo belongs to a completely different tradition, that he has nothing to do with Ramakrishna. It's a funny irony that some followers of Ramakrishna can become fanatical about Ramakrishna and almost sectarian in a way and say that, Aurobindo's this. Sri Aurobindo was very profoundly influenced and inspired by both Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, and actually had mystical communications with both of them, with Swamiji in jail for 2 weeks, with Sri Ramakrishna 3 times. Sri Ramakrishna sent him 3 messages on an occult plane. And he considered Sri Ramakrishna to be the greatest of all incarnations, in fact. So we'll talk about that next time. So what does he say? He's saying that Sri Aurobindo is distinguishing 2 kinds of... So there's, first of all, the fundamental distinction between cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism. Then, if we draw a tree, and then under spiritual Hinduism, we get a sectarian spiritual Hinduism and then a non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. And he says, so what are these, what's an example of, or what are some examples of sectarian spiritual Hinduism? Let's go back to Sri Ramakrishna's time. Late 19th century. Late 19th century. There are a lot of people who come to him who were Shaktas, who believed in Divine Mother, Kali, Shakti worship. Others came and were Vaishnavas. Others were followers of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual school of Shankara. A lot of them were Brahma followers of the Brahma Samaj. Each of them we can call sectarian forms of spiritual Hinduism. What do I mean by that? They're all one-sided in a certain way. And Sri Ramakrishna himself would point this out and encourage them to be broader. He would say, you Shaktas, you're always putting down Krishna. And you Vaishnavas are always putting down Shakti, Divine Mother, and saying that our Krishna is superior to your Divine Mother and this and that. What do the Brahmos do? They dismiss all idol worship. They dismiss all forms of God. They say we don't believe in incarnations. We believe only in the formless but personal God. What do Advaita Vedantins do? Just a sectarian, just in a different way. We believe only in our true nature as non-dual, impersonal, pure consciousness. And then where does it leave the personal God? It's a lower truth. It's a lower reality. It's good for those inferior spiritual aspirants who haven't yet come up to our level. And so Swami Tapasananji, in his book Bhakti Schools of Vedanta, in the introduction, he has a great section called The Patronizing Attitude of Advaita Vedanta, where he used the analogy of Mount Everest. And he says that the followers of Shankara's school, they're at the peak of Mount Everest, looking down at the base camp at the bhaktas, the devotees of the personal God. And they say, yeah, you guys are good too. You'll eventually come up to our level. Sectarian. What did Sri Ramakrishna do? He corrected each of them. He said to Vaishnavas, it's great. You will realize God through your path, but try to be more broad-minded. You should realize that the same infinite divine reality manifests in different forms, and don't go into this game of higher and lower and hierarchies, because that can become a source of ego, actually. It's very dangerous. So by contrast, Sri Aurobindo distinguishes these sectarian forms of spiritual Hinduism with the non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism revived, resuscitated by none other than Sri Ramakrishna himself. It's a wonderful letter. It's a treasure which I think most people don't even know about, this obscure 1910 letter that Sri Aurobindo wrote to his brother Bidin. So please look at it. There's a link in the YouTube description. So now, with this in the background, what exactly is this non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism? What are its core principles? This is the way, in hindsight, I just think about, in a perfect world, how, I don't have kids, I'm a monk, but if I had kids, how would I teach Hinduism to my kids? How would you, as Hindu or Vedantic parents, how will you explain Vedanta or Hinduism to your kids? This is my answer, this is my suggestion. There are 4 core doctrines of Hinduism, and here I mean non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. First of all, before I get into it, you might think, well, where do these doctrines come from? Was it Sri Ramakrishna in the 1800s who first introduced this? No. What both Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo say, and others, is that what Sri Ramakrishna did, all this non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism you can find in the ancient scriptures. You find it in the Vedas, you find it in the Bhagavad Gita, you find it in the Upanishads. But what happened is, in the course of time, different sectarian commentators who were all trying to establish their respective philosophical schools, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, and so on, what do? They took these universal non-sectarian scriptures and they gave them sectarian interpretations, one-sided interpretations. And so it took God in the form of Sri Ramakrishna in the 19th century to come and to remind us of the original non-sectarian spirit of the Vedas, of the Upanishads, of the Bhagavad Gita, and other great scriptures. That's the background to keep in mind here. So it's not some newfangled idea introduced by the latest avatar. No. He's drawing our attention to the original non-sectarian spirit of the Hindu scriptures. So what are the 4 key doctrines? Number 1, there is one infinite, impersonal, personal divine reality that goes by many names and that manifests in countless forms. There's a common misconception. Remember from the 3 Ps, one of the 3 Ps is polytheism. Very common misunderstanding, misconception, caricature of Hinduism. Hindus are polytheistic, beyond the pale. They believe in all sorts of weird superstitions, monkey gods, and this strange lady is holding a severed head. No. The Rig Veda says, this is the most ancient religious scripture in the world, Ekam sad vipra bahuda vadanti. The divine truth is one. Sages call it by various names. I recently did a podcast interview with a Vaishnava Swami named Swami Padmanabha. And we were talking about this issue of is Hinduism polytheistic or what? And he's a kind of scholarly monk, and so he came up with this term, which I like. He says, Hindus believe in, or they follow the doctrine of polymorphic monotheism. Polymorphic monotheism. You can throw out this term in a cocktail party and impress your friends. No, Hinduism isn't polytheistic. It's a polymorphic monotheism. Okay, but I want to make a little amendment to it, actually. So what I take him, because he's a Vaishnava probably, he's thinking in terms of theism. Theism means a belief in a personal God, okay? And he's saying that there's only one ultimate personal God, but that one personal God can incarnate in many forms. It can manifest as Ganesha and Kali and so on and so forth. Great. The problem is Hinduism is even vaster than monotheism because it also accepts the impersonal, non-dual aspect of the same divine reality. That's why Sri Ramakrishna would teach Brahma or Shakti Abhed in Bengali, which means Brahman, the non-dual Brahman, the pure consciousness taught in Shankara school of Advaita Vedanta, is non-different from Shakti, which is this monotheistic personal God, which manifests in different forms. So Sri Ramakrishna would use the analogy of an infinite ocean, which he likened to Satchit Ananda. And he says, under the cooling influence of the gentle breeze of devotion, bhakti, that ocean forms into different formations of ice. Each of those forms corresponds to a different form of the personal God. Okay. So what's my preferred term? Building on Swami Padmanabha, but broadening it a little bit. Hindus subscribe to polymorphic monism. Polymorphic monism. Monism here, don't take it in a sectarian Advaitic sense. Monism means there's one infinite divine reality, which is polymorphic in the sense that morph just means forms, right? So poly means a lot, many. The one infinite, impersonal, personal divine reality manifests in countless forms. That's polymorphic monism. And it has both impersonal and personal aspects. And is both with and without form. So this wonderful Hindu doctrine of the Ishta Devata, which is usually translated as chosen deity, this is grounded in this first principle. See, this is remarkable. In a single Hindu household, the father might be an Advaitin, the mother might be a devotee of Ganesha, the kid, the two kids might be worshippers of Kali and Hanuman. Everybody's a good Hindu. And they all know that they're worshiping the same God. That's because of this doctrine of Ishta Devata. I would suggest that a better translation than chosen deity is our preferred form of the divine. Why? Well, because this idea of chosen deity, it sounds too much like it's coming from our side. I choose God in this form. And there's something that could be a little egoistic about it. It could also, see, we are naturally drawn to a certain form of God or certain conception of God because of what we did in our past lives, because of our purva janma samskaras, because of our spiritual practices in past lives. Which means what? Ultimately, it's God, the divine, who chooses us. So what form of God do we naturally prefer based on our past life samskaras? That's the Ishta Devata. Okay. Second of the four core principles, number 2, each of us is intimately connected to that infinite divine reality. Intimately connected. Notice the KG language here. There's a reason for it. All Hindus believe we are in reality not the body-mind complex, and that the root of all of our suffering is our mistaken identification with the body-mind complex, and our failure to realize that we are actually divine, eternal souls. But different schools of Hinduism, different traditions within Hinduism, explain our intimate connection with the divine in different ways. Okay? And so the Upanishad, for instance, calls us Amritasya Putraha, which means we are all children of immortal bliss. But that can be interpreted in different ways, and has been by different sectarian interpreters. So what does Shankara say at the end of the day? We are identical with God as non-dual pure consciousness. But there are so many devotional schools of Hinduism which say that no, we are children of God, we're servants of God, we are amshas, we're portions or parts of God. All of these are equally valid. How do we know that? Sri Ramakrishna himself experienced all of these different relationships with God and said, this is recorded in the gospel, I have come to the final realization that I am a part and God is a whole, I am a servant and God is a master, and that I am He. I am identical with Brahman. All of these are true. He says, if I have a flute, why should I play only one note on that flute? Boring. Let me rather play ragas and raginis on this flute. What does it mean? I want to commune with God in different ways. That's the second doctrine. Each of us is intimately connected with this infinite divine reality, but what kind of relationship, what kind of connection we have with the divine also is based on our temperament, right? Third key doctrine, what's the goal of life? We attain liberation from all suffering. We attain limitless bliss and fulfillment through the direct experiential knowledge of the divine reality in any form or aspect. Doesn't matter. Sri Ramakrishna would say to touch the Ganga, you don't have to run your finger down from where it starts, the source, all the way down to where it merges into the ocean. No, touch it at any point, you've touched the Ganga, Mother Ganga, the river Ganges. No, likewise, you can realize God in any form. You can realize your true nature as non-dual pure consciousness, realize God as Christ or Allah or Vishnu, Krishna, and so on. All equally fine. I wanted to mention here that there's another traditional doctrine of Hinduism called the 4 Purusharthas, the 4 aims or goals or values in Hindu life. The four are, many of you are familiar with it. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma, ethical living. That's the foundation of even spiritual practices and a good life. But then the second one is Artha. There's another common caricature of Hinduism that it's kind of otherworldly, mystical, life-denying. No, it accepts fully the second and third values, Artha and Kama. Artha means acquisition of material possessions, wealth. Kama, fulfillment of your desires, worldly desires. These are not very spiritual desires, actually. But then finally there's the fourth and final value, which is moksha, liberation. Every Hindu is told, as long as you live a life based on dharma, ethical living, you can legitimately fulfill your desire for material possessions, artha, and also fulfill your worldly desires. So long as you recognize the highest ideal, which is moksha, spiritual realization, liberation from all suffering and liberation from the cycle of rebirth. And I'm reminded of, I attended my sister's wedding a long time ago. And one advantage of having a Hindu priest who is non-Indian is that they don't just like recite these Sanskrit mantras without knowing. I mean, I don't know if even the priest knows what the meaning of these Sanskrit things are. But we had this a white American Hindu priest conduct the wedding ceremony. And a few weeks before the ceremony, he sent us all a Word document explaining the spiritual significance of all of the different wedding rituals. And one of them is called Kashi Yatra, which means pilgrimage to Kashi. And this is a ritual which, it's not performed in all Hindu wedding ceremonies, but in many. But try to understand the beauty of this, the spiritual significance of what it is. So basically the priest asks the groom, are you sure you want to go through with this? Or do you want to drop everything now, leave your soon-to-be wife, your bride, run off to Kashi, Varanasi, a very holy spiritual place, and try to realize the highest goal of life, which is liberation. Become a monk and try to realize the highest goal of life. And it can be playful in these as a wedding ritual, because then it's the bride side of the family who has to persuade the groom, no, she's a wonderful person, you'll love her, and she's way better than liberation and being a monk. But what's the idea? It's not serious, and I mean, I haven't heard of any cases of them just suddenly like, all right, let me become a monk instead. It could happen, who knows? But the idea is to remind these newlyweds or soon-to-be newlyweds of the highest spiritual ideal, and that even marriage should have an ultimately spiritual purpose, a spiritual aim. That's why Sri Ramakrishna would tell householders, it's fine that you've married, but after having one or two children, try to live with your spouse like brother and sister. Try to spiritualize the marriage. Fourth doctrine, this is it. This is the whole of non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. You can put it on a business card, keep it in your pocket, and then if somebody asks you, runs India and says, what does your religion teach? You hand them, here you go, my kind sir. Fourth doctrine, there are various paths. There are in fact infinite paths to this goal of the direct experiential knowledge of the divine. And Vedanta and this non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism, it generalizes these paths or kind of puts them into four broad categories, the four yogas. These are the four royal highways to the realization of the divine. Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action. Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion toward a personal God. Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, where the focus is on meditating on and trying to realize your true nature as non-dual pure consciousness. Raja Yoga, typically based on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and it's a path primarily focused on concentration and meditation to realize your true spiritual nature as Purusha, separate from the body-mind complex. Sri Ramakrishna, or Swamiji would then say, this is very important, in a lecture he gave on Sri Ramakrishna, he would say that each of the world religions corresponds to one or more of these four yogas. It's a very important statement. Because then what does that mean? What are the implications of that statement? Every one of the world religions then becomes an equally valid path to realizing that divine. That's the famed broadness of Hinduism, right? It's because we understand the divine in this vast way that we can accept all the different religious and spiritual paths leading to the divine as equally valid, without going into this game of higher and lower, I'm better than you. You guys are good, but not as good as we are. So, let me summarize. Well, okay, I want to mention this. This is actually important, and it's worth thinking about. In an 1894 letter to Mrs. Hale, Swami Vivekananda writes the following, 1st July 1894. He quotes a Christian missionary professor of Sanskrit named Monier Williams. He says, "Here I find a quotation from a speech by Sir Monier Williams, professor of Sanskrit in the Oxford University. It is very strange as coming from one who every day expects to see the whole of India converted to Christianity." And he quotes this Monier Williams. Fascinating. "And yet, it is a remarkable characteristic of Hinduism that it neither requires nor attempts to make converts. It's not a proselytizing religion. Nor is it at present by any means decreasing in numbers. Nor is it being driven out of the field by two such proselytizing religions as Mohammedanism and Christianity. On the contrary, it is at present rapidly increasing. And far more remarkable than this is that it is all receptive, all embracing, and all comprehensive." It sounds like an advertisement for Hinduism written by a staunch Christian missionary. And then he continues, "It claims to be the one religion of humanity, of human nature, of the entire world. It cares not to oppose the progress of Christianity nor of any other religion, for it has no difficulty in including all other religions within its all-embracing arms and ever-widening fold. And in real fact, Hinduism has something to offer which is suited to all minds. Its very strength lies in its infinite adaptability to the infinite diversity of human characters and human tendencies. It has its highly spiritual and abstract side suited to the philosophical higher classes." Which of the four yogas? Obviously, the path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. "Its practical and concrete side suited to the man of affairs and the man of the world, Karma Yoga. Its aesthetic and ceremonial side suited to the man of poetic feeling and imagination, Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. Its quiescent and contemplative side suited to the man of peace and lover of seclusion, Raja Yoga, the path of meditation." And then Swamiji says, in astonishment, "This, as coming from one of the staunchest defenders of Christianity, is wonderful indeed. But he seems to have got the idea quite correct." And now I make a conjecture here, which I haven't fully confirmed, but I invite you guys to explore this as well. If you study the complete works of Swami Vivekananda in a chronological manner, what I found is that before this letter was written on 1st July 1894, he never taught Vedanta on the basis of the four yogas. And then, I don't think coincidentally, after encountering this passage from a Christian missionary talking about Hinduism and the greatness of Hinduism precisely because it's so all-embracing and because it has something for everybody, for people of different temperaments, and explaining it in terms of the four yogas. Lo and behold, after 1st July 1894, Swamiji starts teaching Vedanta on the basis of the four yogas. It's quite striking. It would be an irony, a beautiful irony, if he got this tip about teaching Vedanta on the basis of the four yogas from a Christian missionary who would have loved nothing more than to see all the heathen Hindus converted to Christianity. So this is very striking to me. And so striking that I had to ask ChatGPT about it. And I asked ChatGPT a question, and I said, because the moment I read, I was like, there's got to be some saying about how enemies know you better than you know yourself, because they inspect you in every nook and cranny. And so I asked ChatGPT this. And ChatGPT says, well, look, there's a Chinese philosopher who said this, but it's not quite what you're looking for. And then it asked me, but do you want me to create some aphorisms, some sayings along those lines? I said, yes, please do. And it gave me a bunch, and I'm just going to read you two of them because it's remarkable how advanced AI is becoming. "The enemy watches with sharper eyes than the friend ever needs." So nice little think about that. It's good. And then another one, not so succinct, but still powerful and evocative. "An enemy studies you for advantage. In doing so, he may come to know you better than you know yourself." So I think this is Monier Williams, this is a good case of that. He was studying Hinduism so carefully and minutely in order to refute it and to try to convert Hindus to Christianity that he became, it's like almost Ravana with Rama. He was obsessing about killing Rama and overcoming Rama, and then he became a bhakta of Rama. So that's it. This is the beauty of Hinduism. If you accept these four doctrines, these four core doctrines of non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism, you're a Hindu. What are the four doctrines? I'm going to repeat this multiple times. Number one, there's one infinite, impersonal, personal, divine reality that goes by various names and which manifests in countless forms. Polymorphic monism. Number two, we suffer because we mistakenly identify with the body-mind complex. In truth, we are eternal divine souls intimately connected with that infinite divine reality. in some way, and there are different relationships. Number 3, the goal of life, the ultimate goal of life, is to attain liberation from all suffering. How? By realizing that infinite divine reality in any form or aspect. And number 4, there are infinite paths to realizing this infinite divine. This is one of Sri Ramakrishna's greatest sayings. Tini ananto patho ananto. The infinite is divine, the divine is infinite, and therefore the paths to the divine are equally infinite. But now, a little technical qualification here for people who know philosophy. Philosophers talk about necessary and sufficient conditions for something. So what I'm giving here are not necessary and sufficient conditions for being a Hindu. Because there's a reason for that. It's not necessary to subscribe to these 4 doctrines to be a Hindu. Because what would happen? Then we're excluding all the sectarian spiritual Hindus who don't have such broad doctrines, right? So whether you're a follower of Shankara or a Vaishnava or a Shakta, they're not going to agree that there's no hierarchy and that all paths lead equally to the divine. There's always going to be a higher and a lower with most of these sectarian schools. But these 4 doctrines are sufficient for being a Hindu. And if you lean that way, if you lean more toward a non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism, that's all it takes to be Hindu. That's the beauty of it. Okay. Now, when I gave that talk in Trabuco a few months ago called Is Vedanta Hindu, the comment section is fascinating. Look at it. I encourage you. One of the comments was written by a non-Indian, a white guy, who wrote, "I've always felt weird calling myself a Hindu since I'm white. I usually just say devotee of Ramakrishna. But if it's all right to say I'm a Hindu, I definitely will from now on." And then that generated this whole, I think it has 10 comments, replies so far, last I checked. Hinduism in its deepest sense, if you understand these 4 core spiritual principles of Hinduism, you should have no problem calling yourself Hindu, regardless of whether you have brown skin or white skin or black skin or whatever. It has nothing to do with ethnicity or culture. These are the 4 universal spiritual principles of Hinduism. And so when people ask you what your religion is, you should proudly say I'm Hindu and then explain it. Give the business card with the 4 doctrines. It's an extraordinary religion. So now I would add, beyond these 4 doctrines, there's what I would call Hinduism plus. Hinduism plus. Okay, those 4 doctrines I just explained are enough to make you Hindu, but these 2 extra doctrines, 5 and 6, you'll find them in many Hindu scriptures. You'll find that many Hindus believe them, but not all. Okay, what are they? So doctrine 5, karma and rebirth, the doctrines of karma and rebirth. I don't have much time to talk about them, but I've got a whole book on this called Karma and Rebirth in Hinduism, coming out in a couple months. It's a little plug. What's the basic idea? I don't need to go into detail here, but karma says we reap what we sow. Whatever we do will have karmic effects, either later in this life or in a future life. And rebirth, we get as many chances as it takes to get it right. And so the beauty of it is, these doctrines of karma and rebirth inevitably also entail universal liberation. It's such an optimistic and hopeful doctrine. Nobody will be left out. Sri Ramakrishna would say, some people will be fed at 6 in the morning, others at 12 noon, others at 6 p.m., others at midnight, but nobody will be left out. It might take one person 5 lives, another person 1,000,000 lives, but nobody will be left out. Okay. So the interesting thing is, there are many Hindus, some Hindus, especially these days, modern Hindus, educated, big universities, this and that, scientists, they somehow have this, I don't want to believe in these superstitious doctrines, some of them. So M was one of them, actually, when he first met Sri Ramakrishna. So July 21st, 1883, M, the author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Kathamrita, Mohendranath Gupta, he says to Sri Ramakrishna, "I haven't much faith in rebirth and past life tendencies. Will that in any way injure my devotion to God?" What does Sri Ramakrishna not say? He doesn't say, "You're not a Hindu if you don't believe in karma and rebirth." No. He says, "It is enough to believe that all is possible in God's creation. Never allow the thought to cross your mind that your ideas are the only true ones and that those of others are false. Then God will explain everything." And lo and behold, what happened when he remained open? M eventually fully accepted the doctrines of karma and rebirth. But you see the generosity of Sri Ramakrishna as this non-sectarian Hindu. He puts it in the Hinduism plus category. you're still a good Hindu, even if you don't believe in karma rebirth. But just be open. Don't be dogmatic. Second, or not second, sixth, if you were counting by. So the 4 core doctrines of spiritual Hinduism, and then now I'm talking about Hinduism plus. Doctrine number 5, the first doctrine of Hinduism plus are the doctrines of karma and rebirth. And then the number 6, or so the second doctrine of Hinduism plus, it's the doctrine of caste. The term here is Varna, V-A-R-N-A. In its original Vedantic sense, this is very important to keep in mind. You'll find that this idea of Varna, caste, in its original sense, you'll find in the Gita, for instance. Chatur varnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagashaha, says Krishna. Krishna says, I created this caste system on the basis of 2 principles, guna and karma. Guna means your own innate temperament and qualities, and karma means your behavior, what you do in the world. Some people may have certain innate talents and qualities which they don't actualize, which is a shame. And a well-functioning society is one in which you can actually utilize your gifts and your God-given talents and your temperament to your own advantage and to society's advantage. We find it in the Mahabharata as well. Not birth, not initiation, not Veda knowledge, not even lineage causes a person to be twice born. The only cause is behavior. How do you behave? That's the true mark of a Brahmin. Then Mahabharata says in another place, truth, generosity, patience, good conduct, harmlessness, austerity, compassion. Where these are found, that person is said to be a Brahmana. That's the truer understanding of caste, actually. You're not born into a caste. It's based on your innate qualities and how you live in the world. This is a very logical doctrine, actually, if you think about it. In universities and high schools, we have career counselors. We have people who are professionals in helping you to discover what is your swadharma. This is a term used in the Gita. Your own law of being. What is it that makes you tick? What is it that you love? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? And then they'll encourage you on that path, right? And if you do that, you make maximal spiritual progress and you maximally benefit society. Because if my temperament, my guna and my karma leans toward being a doctor, if I'm gifted in medicine and society forces me to be a lawyer, I'm not going to be a very good lawyer, right? Just think about it. So what happened? Well, Swami Vivekananda says that this original caste system based on guna and karma degenerated into the hereditary caste system, which is responsible for all the abuses and oppression that we know. But if we go back to the original caste system, it's actually a very logical doctrine, it seems to me. But again, you don't have to accept anything about caste. You can still be a Hindu because it falls into this Hinduism plus category. So now, I wanted to end the talk, so I'm going to take a few more minutes, if you don't mind. About 5, maximum 7 to 8 minutes. I hope you're not falling asleep. How is all this relevant to us as spiritual aspirants? What are the practical benefits of subscribing to these 4 core principles of non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism? I'll just mention 4 things. Number 1, we need not and we should not shy away from calling ourselves Hindu. This is important in this day and age where Hinduism has almost become a bad word for some reason. No, we should be proud Hindus. Swami Vivekananda, he talked about what he called an aggressive Hinduism. And he said that we should be aggressive Hindus. And that doesn't mean, it sounds weird and off-putting. No, it doesn't mean violence. It doesn't mean forcibly converting people. No. But we shouldn't be so timid. If Hindus have a vice, it's timidity. Oh, let them say whatever they want. It's too much. Swamiji hated that. Don't be tamasic. You should explain what your religion is. Be articulate. Have those business cards and give them the 4 principles. It's not a proselytizing religion, but we should be proud of our religion and explain it to our kids if we have children. Explain it to others. A lot of Hindus don't have that clarity of understanding, actually, to be honest. So learn it for yourself and then teach others. Okay, and second, it's really important to keep in mind that Hinduism is not an ethnic religion. So it's perfectly fine for a non-ethnic Indian to be Hindu. It's not just fine, it's a wonderful thing. And more people shouldn't have these reservations about calling themselves Hindu. Be open about it. I did a ChatGPT prompt on which Hollywood celebrities call themselves Hindu. And the only one I found was, can you guess? Yeah, Julia Roberts, the only one. I mean, there are others who are sympathetic to Hinduism. They admire Hinduism, Robert Downey Jr., Will Smith. But there's only one card-carrying Hollywood actress or actor who identifies as Hindu. Come on, we need more of this. All right. And third benefit, if we accept that Hinduism is basically these 4 core spiritual principles, it's so freeing and liberating, and it makes spiritual life fun. Because Hinduism, the beauty of Hinduism, that's what Monier Williams, that Christian missionary professor, points out. It's not a one-size-fits-all religion. Each one of us in the room, we might be Hindus, but each one of us has an individualized religion that's suited exactly to our temperament, based on what we did in our past lives. So Swami Vivekananda would say, no man is born to any religion. He has a religion in his own soul. So what is the true Hinduism? It helps us to discover what is that religion, that unique, individualized, custom-made religion hidden in the depths of our soul. And what's the best way to discover this? Explore different spiritual traditions to your heart's content. Take Buddhist mindfulness into your practice, incorporate it. Take Christian prayer and the Islamic idea of surrender and the beautiful Christian hymns and songs composed by the great classical composers like Bach, Buxtehude, Mozart, Beethoven. Make that part of your practice. And the beauty of it is, it's not just a kind of sort of wishy-washy spiritual dilettantism where you don't pick a lane. No, you're firmly grounded in these 4 core spiritual principles, which makes you a Hindu. And because of that, you can incorporate aspects of other traditions to your heart's content without confusion. So that's the third and now final benefit. If you understand Hinduism in terms of these 4 core principles, spiritual life is not just confined to the meditation room, to the shrine, to the puja room. Sri Aurobindo used to say, all life is yoga. All life is yoga. And that's what this understanding, this spiritual understanding of Hinduism empowers us to practice in our day-to-day life. Swami Vivekananda said, the Vedanta is the rationale of all religions. Without the Vedanta, every religion is superstition. With it, everything becomes religion. So what he means by Vedanta here is just non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. What does he mean? Without the Vedanta, every religion is superstition. Without those 4 core spiritual principles, what happens? The puja just becomes mechanical rituals. The do's and don'ts and the I'll eat this but won't eat this become just kind of sources of dogma and fanaticism and ego and obsession with the non-essentials. With Vedanta, the puja becomes a means to direct spiritual realization of God. All those do's and don'ts about food, we can understand them in the Gita sense as helping us to cultivate sattva, the third and most spiritual guna, so that we can purify our minds and ultimately realize God. Right? Now, then the other part of the phrase, he says, with it, everything becomes religion. With Vedanta, everything becomes religion. There's nothing that's not religious. That's why Nivedita, summarizing Swamiji's main message, she says, henceforth, no distinction between sacred and secular. To labor is to pray. Raising your kids, going to work, arguing with their spouse. Everything literally can become a means of spiritual progress if you do it right, if you change your attitude. You can spiritualize anything based on these 4 yogas. Right? Because raising your kids, going to work, that falls under karma yoga. Do everything as an offering to the divine. Try to see even your children and your spouse and others that you interact with as manifestations of the divine. That's what Sri Ramakrishna would call Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva. Serve others in a spirit of worship by trying to see the divine in everyone. So, as Hindus, let's try to spiritualize every moment of our lives. And let's not be so shy about calling ourselves Hindu. We shouldn't be timid Hindus. Let's be proud Hindus and stand up for our religion when people misunderstand it, when they caricature our religion as in terms of the 3 Ps or the 3 Cs, caste, cows, curry, and so on. Correct them. Pull out one of those business cards. Give them the 4 doctrines. So that when somebody asks you, what exactly does your religion teach? What does it mean to be Hindu? You can give them a clear and powerful and succinct answer. Thank you. Some announcements. There are refreshments outside. Please help yourself. And then there's going to be a Q&A with me in the greenhouse living room next to the bookstore. And I wanted to make a few announcements because we are fortunate enough to have two, not one, but two guest Swamis visiting from foreign centers. We have our beloved Swami Atma Rupananda, who is the head of our Gretz Center in France, visiting us. And on Tuesday, May 27th at 7:30 p.m., he'll be giving a talk or a class called, it's a talk called Our Heritage. On Friday, May 30th, he's going to give a talk at 7:30 p.m. called The Work Before Us. And then the second guest Swami, his name is Swami Shantatmananda. He may not be so familiar to you guys. He's the head of our Gurugram Center in India. He is going to give a talk called Lessons from the Holy Mother on Thursday, May 29th at 7:30 p.m. And he will also deliver the Sunday talk next Sunday, June 1st at 11 a.m. called the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Tradition. So be there, please. And I'll be greeting you guys right out the door, the front door, right now. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.